This is Justin back from Books, Bricks, and Boards, and today I'm here to talk about something that is fairly new to me, but definitely not new to the gaming community. That being Tunnels and Trolls. In particular, this is the deluxe edition of Tunnels and Trolls. So, a little bit of history on this game. It was actually the second role playing game ever created, and it came about because Ken St. Andre got an early copy of the original Dungeons and Dragons box set, and he decided that it was way too convoluted. He wasn't a war gamer, as most of the folks playing it were, but he really loved the idea of role playing. The role playing as a term had not even been coined yet. It was actually somebody from Flying Buffalo, the company that puts out Tunnels and Trolls, that coined the term role playing. But Ken St. Andre went about creating his own version of D&D in a format that he felt was more in line with what he wanted it to be. And that became Tunnels and Trolls. Now, Deluxe Edition, I believe, is the 8th or ninth edition of the game since 1975 or 77, whenever this came out. That being said, it's actually still very similar to the original edition. Unlike Dungeons and Dragons, which has changed vastly since its origins, it's hardly recognizable from what was in those early versions of the game. Tunnels and Trolls is actually close enough that it's basically compatible on the fly with its earlier editions. You could pick up an old module and play right through it with this new Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. I guess it's not new. It came out in 2015, so I'm a little behind the curve there. But for those of you that are regulars to my channel, you know that I enjoy role-playing, I enjoy board games, and I also enjoy solo board games. Well, I have tried a few solo RPGs and have had some mixed results with them. None of them really scratched that itch. I've played some game books that were on Drive-Thru RPG, Mad Monks of Quantum, and The Undercity, which was another one related to that. Just never really got me the satisfaction level I was looking for. So recently, I was doing a little history work on the history of RPGs, and I came across Tunnels and Trolls. And I'd heard of the game before. You know, I've started playing Dungeons and Dragons back in the early 80s, and as such, I was a regular reader of Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine, and the different people I played with, they would mention other games. I had a catalog called War Games West, and I would see things like Tunnels and Trolls in that. But it was really just a name at that point to me. It just looked like a knockoff to what was the granddaddy of them all, and what me and my friends viewed as really the gold standard for RPGs. But I have grown to appreciate the simpler things, especially when it comes to rule sets. And I was doing a little bit of reading and found out that Tunnels and Trolls has an extensive solo game book component, so much so that a lot of people in the early years mistook it for only being a solo game. So I thought I would give this a try. I picked up a copy of the Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls book, and off we go. So this book is actually rather large for a simple game. The book is around 400 pages, just shy of 400. It does include 2 adventures, including one that is solo. The majority of the book is actually going to be related to optional things. So things that you can add to your campaign. There's a section where you can create heroes of different ancestries than the traditional. You can be orcs and skeletons and dragons. Oh my! Um, the the system itself is very simple. You have your 8 characteristics, your 8 statistics, I guess. You roll them 3d6 down the line, and what you get is what you get. And very similar to the original Dungeons and Dragons in that regard. Now, where it's different is that they all contribute to different parts of your character, and a big thing is the adds. So, with your strength, luck, dex, and speed, for every point above 12 in each of those, you're going to add one to your personal adds. Where those come into play is going to be during combat. During combat, you'll get a certain number of dice based on your weapon and potentially your skill as a warrior, and you will put your adds with that roll, and that is going to be your effective combat hits score. You compare that to the combat hits score of your opponent, and the difference is how much the lower ends up taking in damage. There's a little bit more to it. You can pick out individual targets with missile weapons and magical spells, and you can do some damage even if you lost the combat through what's called spite damage, which would be created by rolling d6s or rolling sixes on a six-sided die. But other than that, that is as simple as the system is for combat. Now, if that seems too abstract for your liking, Tunnels and Trolls might not be the game for you. It also is a game that only uses six-sided dice. So again, if that's going to be a problem for you, this might not be the game you're looking for. But if that hasn't scared you away yet, you're going to find some really great things. Because the combat is so abstract, because it is so simple, it makes it very easy to solo and get a similar experience to the group game. Because there's not really a lot of decision making that takes place outside of character building. Sure, if you're a wizard, you can cast some different spells, and if you're using a ranged weapon, you can pick an individual target. Truth be told, in most of these game books, you're only going to have one target to choose from most of the time anyways. Or if you don't, they're all going to be identical, so it won't really matter. The other thing that is interesting about a game that is as old as Tunnels and Trolls is the saving roll. Now, this is not a saving throw, as there is in Dungeons and Dragons. A saving roll is basically a skill check. And so you can do a saving roll based on any of your attributes. So your prime attributes are going to be strength, con, dex, speed, luck, and IQ, wizardry, and charisma. So if I wanted to potentially persuade a guard to let me out of my cell, I might make a charisma saving roll. Whereas if I wanted to bend the bars of that cell, I might use a strength saving roll. The GM is going to then decide what level of difficulty it is. And a first level difficulty is a check of 20. And then for each level beyond that, you add 5. If I wanted to bend bars and it was only a level 1 roll, I would take that 20 of a level 1 check, subtract my strength score, and then whatever's left is what I would need to roll on the dice to be successful. So if I had a strength of 12, I would need to roll an 8 on 2d6. Another thing that is interesting about this that we see a lot in games today, but was not common at the time that this was created, is the concept of exploding dice. So in Tunnels and Trolls, if I roll that saving roll and I get doubles, I get to roll again and add to what I've already rolled. So if I rolled 2 4s, I got an 8, I've already made it. But let's say I rolled 2 1s. I've got a 2. That would normally be bad. But in Tunnels and Trolls, I get to roll again and add to that 2. So if I rolled a 6 afterwards, I've made my 8 because 2 and 6 is 8. So that's as simple as the saving roll system and the combat system. So that's the two major pillars of gameplay mechanics right there. There is some more to it, though. So whenever you are choosing your race, which they call Ken, you have some different multipliers. So humans, everything you roll is 1 across the board. Uh, Dwarves, you take anything you roll for strength times 2. Anything you roll for con times 2. Dex is times 1. Luck is times 3/4. So you do that, and then that is how your prime attributes are determined at the start. I did scroll past something in character creation. There are only 3 primary classes. There are some extras when you get into some of the optional things in the elaboration section of the book. But for the basic game, there are warriors, rogues, and wizards. Warriors get to do more damage with weapons. They can use any weapon, they can use any armor, and they get double value out of any armor. So they're pretty potent. Wizards can cast spells, which warriors are not allowed to. And some of the spells are quite good, even though they have some goofy names. And then rogues, while they are not what you would think of as rogue if you come from a Dungeons and Dragons background, they are rogue in the idea that they are not part of the norm. They are neither warrior nor wizard. They dabble a little in both. In the book, it kind of describes them as the Grey Mouser from the Fritz Lieber series. So that is that's kind of the 3 types of heroes in Tunnels and Trolls. Now, if you get into some of the elaborations, you can do specialists if you get triples while you're rolling. That's another thing I didn't mention is when you're rolling your prime attributes, if you roll triples on the 3 dice that you roll a stat with, you get to do the exploding dice trick with that as well. So if I rolled, say, 3 2s for my strength, I'm not stuck with a 6. I'm stuck with whatever I roll after that plus the 6. And if I keep rolling triples, I keep adding until I don't roll triples. So you can end up with some ridiculous stats right off the bat. And if any of your stats are above the teens, the first number is going to be your letter. So if your highest stat is in the teens, then that is going to be a first level character. If it's below 10, it's a 0 level character. If your highest stat is in the 20s, you're a second level character, so on and so forth. So here on the character sheet, it also mentions talents. So that's going to be basically your skills. They are very much in line with like a first edition secondary traits or secondary role system where you could be an armorer, you could be a hunter or whatnot. Those are the types of things that you can do with your talents. And basically they just give you a +3 to your saving roll when you're doing something that is related to that talent. The thing I do like about the way the talent system is set up is it's not tied specifically to a prime attribute. So if, for example, I took a talent as a fisherman, I would have a +3 to my IQ check to determine if my boat was going to be seaworthy. I would get a +3 to my dex check if I needed to swim to get into that boat. And I would get a +3 to my charisma check if I was trying to convince someone that the fish I was selling them was rare and unusual. So that is going to be pretty much character creation and gameplay in a nutshell for Tunnels and Trolls. But I do want to give you a little bit more flavor here to give you an idea of what to expect in this book, because I think there's a lot here. For example, monster ratings. The monster stat block for Tunnels and Trolls can be as simple as 50. That's right. That's the whole stat. That's the whole monster. So I could say that each of these orcs is worth 25. There's 2 orcs, so that's 50 MR. So at 50 MR, they're going to get 6 dice and add 25 to that roll. That's how simple it is. And then they compare that to my weapon dice plus my personal adds that I talked about earlier. Now, you can do some interesting things with those monsters. They don't have to be that simple. You can actually roll them up just like a character, and that works too. But it can be as simple as that if you're playing on the fly and you want to do something quick. Now, when you get back to the back parts of the book, you are going to find some really nice appendices, very reminiscent of many of those early games. And I'm going to show you just one of those because I think it is rather interesting. The weapons glossary, this is not where the stats are. Those are in a different part of the book. But it kind of describes in detail what each of the types of weapon are and what they look like, some of them. And that is just a nice throwback to the Gygaxian list of polearms in the earlier editions. But there are a lot of nice, simple illustrations here. Now, on top of all this, I had mentioned earlier that Tunnels and Trolls has a robust solo component, and now what I am going to do is show you some of that. And here are actually 4 of the different solo adventures for Tunnels and Trolls. These are considered to be reprints of the Corgi edition, which are the smaller format. You see my hand here. But these are extremely simple but fun. They're well written, and they give you a chance to be a player without having a GM. There are 2 adventures in each one of these little Corgi books. This one has Gamesman of Cassar and then Mistywood. This one has Sword for Hire and the Blue Frog Tavern. Now, these typically are going to have some restrictions on what type of characters you can play. Most of them do not allow you to use magic, as I understand, but they still allow you to play the game. They allow you to create your own character. You're not kind of pigeonholed into playing something they've created for you. And some of them do still allow you to use magic, but generally you're probably going to want to be a warrior in these anyways. But they've got a real pulp feel to them. They're a little bit like a choose your own adventure book, but they have the gameplay mechanics for Tunnels and Trolls built in. So they are deceptively longer than what they might appear just based on page count and size, because one paragraph could last you quite a while to play through if you have a combat involved or a saving roll with some consequences. So there are several of these. I actually have 4 or 5 more that are on the way in the mail, and I'm looking forward to playing more of these as I get a chance. But right now, what I'm going to do is actually show you character creation. All right, so what do I think of Tunnels and Trolls as a whole? So clearly I liked it enough that I didn't just buy the digital edition, I also bought the hardback. Let me correct myself. I bought 2 copies of the hardback so I could have a table copy and a shelf copy. I also bought several of these game books, which I plan on playing through myself. And I have got some handy dandy character sheets printed out already. So What do I like about this? I think that it is very much still in the spirit of early RPGs where they are about that pulp feel, the dungeon crawl, the high adventure. Magic is powerful and weird, and the characters are trying to do fantastical things. The mechanics are very appealing to me because they're very simple. I can roll a handful of d6 and put my personal adds together, and then all of the people in the party can do the same thing. We add them all up, and then we compare them to what the monsters have. And then whatever the difference is, that's the damage that the lower takes. That is super simple. Yes, it is abstract, but if you really think about it, it does a very good job for how simple it is in displaying a, a very robust view of combat, because your personal adds come from strength, dexterity, speed, and luck. So, for example, this character that I rolled up on camera, who I'm calling Hank, he's got a 24 in dexterity. That alone gives him a plus 12 to his combat adds. So I could have a warrior that's an 18 strength. That is just a plus 6. So clearly, I can depict the impact of a dexterous fighter having an advantage on the battlefield. And of course, the more things that you are good at, the more personal combat adds you're going to have to give to that. I like how the prime attributes all have purposes. So with the saving rolls, it's not just a modifier that matters, it's the actual stat that matters, because you subtract that from the check. So that is appealing to me. Additionally, when you start looking at what weapons you can use, there are a lot of dex and strength requirements in there. One of the cool things that they did was, if you want to dual wield, that's fine. You just have to meet the strength requirement for both weapons and the dex requirement for both weapons. That's pretty clever. I like how magic is handled. With the magic system, you use wizardry points to cast a spell, but in order to be able to have the ability to cast a spell, you've got to have a high enough IQ and a high enough dexterity, because there's a lot of hand gestures involved in Tunnels and Trolls magic, apparently. So that is appealing to me. I like the talent system. Skill systems in the OSR community and in early games were always a bit of a mixed bag. A lot of, like the early Advanced Dungeons and Dragons with their non-weapon proficiency system was not well received by a lot of the community. I think this is a nice, simple way of handling that. The weapon variety is really cool. The spells are really neat. In this particular book, it's a beautiful hardbound copy. It's very durable, and I didn't mention this anywhere else in the video, but it actually has a full world detailed in here that actually outlines a lot of the locations that are in these game books. Along with that, there are rules for creating all sorts of crazy character kindreds, which is what they use for the ancestries, that you don't normally get to play. Just in the basic game, you can play as leprechauns and fairies and and elves and dwarves and humans, and that's a very different list of character ancestries than what most RPGs have. In addition, when you get to the back of the book and to the elaborations or the optional rules, you can play as dragons and skeletons and all manner of monsters. There's actually a separate RPG based on this system called Monsters, and they basically imported the options from that, and they just give you that as part of this deluxe edition of the game. So I haven't had a lot of luck with solo RPGs. I've played D100 Dungeon. I've played a few others, and I haven't enjoyed them that much because they tend to be just a procedural dungeon generator uh, that is also a bit of a meat grinder and very little skill or story. Well, there's still not a whole lot of skill involved in this. There'll be some choices that will have impact, of course, but there is a story, and that is important to me. You know, I am blessed right now. I have a couple of different groups that I'm doing a little bit of gaming with. I've got my Pathfinder group, which is still going strong, running through the Abomination Vaults. And then I've just recently reestablished some game time with my old group who had went defunct last year, and we have played a little bit of ICRPG, and hopefully that will lead to more game sessions. But occasionally, you just want to be a player. You don't want to have to worry about keeping a whole group of different personalities happy and engaged. And so I think that this is going to scratch that itch, the same way that a lot of my solo board games scratch that itch. Right now, you can get Tunnels and Trolls on Drive-Thru RPG, which is where the digital copy I showed earlier in the video came from. You can also get these beautiful hardbacks and these game books from the Flying Buffalo website. I know that I had watched a video of the Gaming Gang recently, and they had mentioned, and it was about a year old, so it's no fault of their own. They had mentioned that the website was a little archaic, but that has been fixed now. I had no problems navigating it. I've placed a few orders through there already. Plan to probably place some more. But it was very simple to navigate. This book here did run me about $60 through Flying Buffalo, which I was fine to pay. The digital copy was $20 through Drive-Thru RPG, and these run about $10 a piece. So if you are interested in OSR games that you want to play with your group, Tunnels and Trolls could be a good option for you if you want something that's light rules, quick mechanics, and more story focused. And if you're looking for a way to play some story-based RPGs without a group, or while your group is busy with something else, between sessions, whatever the case may be, Tunnels and Trolls looks like it would be a good option for you there as well. But I would love to hear your thoughts on Tunnels and Trolls. If you guys jumped on the bandwagon earlier than me, which is not hard to do because, like I said, I'm very late to this party. Tell me about that in the comments. If you haven't tried Tunnels and Trolls, but you have been convinced by me that you're going to give it a try, let me know. But until next time, if you enjoyed the content, please give me a like, share, and subscribe. And this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.